Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed watching the film. Well, enjoy is not the best word. I hope you all saw the story of plastic. So the story of plastic was the reason we decided to host this panel discussion, a constructive discussion about solutions for the massive use of plastic. And so we have three wonderful panelists joining us today. One moment, I'll share my screen. Share. One moment. Yeah. So we have Attila Touros. He's a senior advisor for strategy and partnership for this fourth sector group and co-founder of circular economy startup Peter Pot. And Attila is a true veteran in circular economy. And then we have, and Attila is based in the Netherlands. Then we have Jane Fischer. She's joining from Bali. It's evening time there. And Jane has long-standing experience in sustainable development on Bali, and she knows all about new materials, bio-based, and materials labeled as compostable, and so on. And then we have Amanda, and she's well known for her famous posters and campaigning on using less plastic on a personal level and in companies. And she will speak about campaigning and what we can do to share the message. And myself, I'm the founder of Indonesian Waste Platform and International Waste Platform, co-founder. And I've been cleaning beaches for 10 years. And my focus is on capacity building and connecting people to work together for solutions on the plastic pollution issue. And I just show you again what our panel discussion is about. So we focus on a constructive discussion, how we can bring solutions back to a personal level and focus on sustainable alternatives, which are often quite abstract. And so our main focus points are alternative delivery models. That's a specialty of Attila. And then these products labeled as eco-friendly, bio-based, and so on. And what choices do we have as consumers? How can we influence brand owners? Which practical solutions are available and within reach? And how can we spread the message? So one moment, I'll stop sharing my screen. So the first speaker is, one moment, we admit some more people. The first speaker is Jane. So up to you, Jane.
Okay, thank you, Nina, and welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening, and special congratulations to the team at The Story of Plastic for your excellent film, and you're the reason we're here tonight to discuss our subject, which is how can individuals and companies implement sustainable alternatives. My area is the bio-based, biodegradable, and compostable material innovations, and so I was very intrigued by what Frans Timmermans, who's working on the EU's Green Deal, he had to say. At about 1 minute 19, he stated, "We're almost there where we can create packaging which has nothing to do with plastics." But then Molly Morris explains that bio-based materials are not necessarily biodegradable. And she was most likely referring to the Coca-Cola plant bottle, which does contain bio-based content, but it's not biodegradable because the material is a bio-PET, which is chemically identical to a fossil-based PET, which is not biodegradable. So Nina, can I ask you to pull up my file? Yes. This is a nice chart by Food Packaging Forum Foundation of the different polymers and packaging, and it's broken down into fossil and bio-based and biodegradable and non-degradable. And thank you, Nina. You can see that PET is available in fully fossil-based or partially fossil-based, and but whatever the material is, it will be non-degradable. And there is also a fully bio-based PET, but it's not commercially available. And you'll note there are several plastics which are fossil-based and biodegradable. And one of them is PBOH, polyvinyl alcohol, a water-soluble plastic, which I'll be mentioning later. So this chart is really helpful because two of the most common misconceptions about sustainable alternatives is that if it's bio-based or made from renewable content, then it certainly will biodegrade anywhere. And if it's fossil-based, then it won't degrade. And these are common consumer misconceptions, and there are many, many more. And almost all of them are due to unclear, imprecise, and intentionally misleading marketing language. For instance, calling a non-biodegradable bottle a plant bottle. And this misuse of messaging is commonly called greenwashing. And greenwashing is endemic in the realm of products claiming to bring environmental benefits. Thank you, Nina, for the chart. As Nina stated, I've been living 30 years in Bali, and as a resort destination, Bali's economy is dependent on tourism. There's been plenty of negative media attention on the plastic pollution problem on Bali's beaches and dive spots, and this negative attention is a real threat to Bali's economy and existence. So between 2008 and 2018, many organizations and individuals were active working under the former governor to battle this plastic pollution. But it wasn't until 2018, after the newly elected governor took office, he signed a legislation which was Indonesia's first province-wide ban on single-use plastics, on 3 types of single-use plastics: straws, polystyrene, and shopping bags. So as a result, what we're finding is that it's important to help people in Bali identify greenwashing of alternatives, because that greenwashing is so powerful that it has the potential to undermine the governor's ban. So some of us came together and we created a coalition of organizations and individuals, including myself, to protect the governor's legislation. And the government has since then asked us to educate the public about greenwashing of these alternatives. In Bali, we still have those oxo-degradable plastics used for shopping bags, cups, boxes, and straws, and we need consumers to understand that these are just conventional plastics mixed with oxo-degradable additives, pro-degradant additives, usually metal salts, and they fragment rather than biodegrade and leave persistent microplastics. We also have an Indonesian-made bioplastic alternative, a single-use water-soluble shopping bag marketed as a cassava starch bag. And by the way, this bag is rebranded by several food suppliers nationally and internationally, but the marketing is always similar. They use taglines like plastic-free, not plastic, compostable, 100% organic, safe for animals. And in some videos, they're even portrayed as safe for humans to drink. So in actuality, they only dissolve in water at 80 degrees centigrade, which certainly isn't the ocean. And although they have been declared compostable in Indonesia, they have not met international standards for industrial compostable or home compostable packaging. And they definitely present risks to animals, such as gastrointestinal obstruction or strangulation, just like conventional plastics. And even if they don't kill you if you drink a bit, they are an industrial product. They haven't been certified as food safe because they're not a food. And knowing there are water-soluble hospital laundry bags on the market made from polyvinyl alcohol, a conventional water-soluble plastic, I decided to test a few of the cassava bags in the government lab for polymer identification. And it turned out that my hunch was right. They contain polyvinyl alcohol mixed with starch. And polyvinyl alcohol is one of those fossil-based biodegradable plastics on the chart that we pulled up earlier. We also have imported single-use alternative straws that look exactly like a plastic straw, and they're marketed as plastic-free and compostable corn plastic. But these straws will only biodegrade in controlled industrial composting facilities, which are not available in Bali. And they're as likely to get stuck in a turtle's nostril as a conventional plastic straw. We also have imported, made in China, single-use food boxes made from sugarcane molded fiber, or what's called bagas, and they're marketed as compostable, but in fact they are not certified for compostability. They contain super toxic grease-proofing PFAS chemicals. The PFAS chemicals are those Teflon or fluorinated chemicals, which are the subject of another very excellent film, Dark Waters. So what our coalition is doing is we're helping consumers to understand that the most environmentally friendly alternatives for banned SUP straw, shopping bags, and polystyrene are reusables, like stainless steel, glass, and bamboo straws, or cloth shopping bags and reusable takeaway boxes. And the most truly biodegradable packaging available to us in Bali are locally grown banana leaves and other woven leaves. And what we're seeing globally is that Starbucks and other fast food companies and supermarkets are responding to consumer demand for non-plastics by replacing single-use plastics with paper or disposable compostables or recyclable plastic with recycled content. I call this strategy material substitution. Consumers are driving this demand for non-plastic packaging because it seems to us like a no-brainer, right? Just substitute single-use conventional plastic straws, cups and bags and bottles with single-use paper or bioplastic straws and cups. Problem solved. However, there really isn't enough evidence to prove that the problem of mismanaged waste and single-use waste will go away with simple material substitution strategies. So one tenet of waste reduction is to aim to reduce waste, which will require landfill or incineration at end of life. Recyclables and compostables are meant to be diverted from landfills and incinerators. However, what we now know is that the recyclability of a recyclable product or packaging or the compostability of a compostable packaging will depend on the availability of facilities which can recycle or compost the specific material. And as it turns out, these facilities usually are not available. Therefore, globally, even if accepted by a green waste collection service, most compostable packaging is rejected and eventually ends up in landfill, where they emit methane, which is a greenhouse gas 20 times stronger than CO2. And of course, waste in landfills pose the risk of escaping into the environment and becoming mismanaged waste. And in many countries, rejected compostable packaging just ends up at the incinerator. Adding to this, the strategy of material substitution can result in regrettable unintended consequences, such as deforestation in the case of substituting plastics with paper, or the unintended consequence of a more toxic material due to undisclosed additives, case in point being those PFAS forever chemicals that I mentioned earlier, especially used for grease-proofing of papers and fiber foodware. Also note that single-use alternative biodegradable or compostable materials are bioplastics. Many of them are bioplastics. Bioplastics are defined as being either biodegradable and or containing full or partial bio-based content. And some of these bioplastics are incorrectly marketed as plastic-free. I say incorrectly because the definition of a plastic is a material which can be molded and contains a polymer or polymers and additives. And so in actuality, many of these plastic-free bioplastics fall under the definition of a single-use plastic because they are designed to be disposable, they can be molded, and they are polymeric material with containing additives. Furthermore, we aren't truly breaking free from plastic or reducing fossil resource dependency with many of these materials marketed as plastic-free. So even disposable paper packaging designed as alternatives for plastic many times contain polymers and synthetic, possibly toxic additives because they have to compete against plastics in performance, and this is certainly difficult. I also note that 100% bio-based material will require petrochemicals during its life cycle, specifically for transportation fuel and manufacturing energy during factory production. And they can potentially emit more greenhouse gases than a conventional plastic during their life cycle. So my point is that material substitution or replacing conventional single-use plastic with any of the single-use, more sustainable materials is probably not going to end up making a measurable difference in reduction of waste generated or fossil fuel demanded. We will still generate waste, we will still add to landfill or incineration, we'll still create risks of environmental pollution and degradation, will still help the petrochemical industry to thrive, and all at the risk of unintended consequences. So what sustainable alternatives should we support? My answer would definitely be to avoid anything disposable and go for reusables with low toxicity. We don't hear much about material innovations created to replace disposables, and this is because investors are less interested in these innovations as they require behavioral and systemic changes to the throwaway economy. I know Attila and Amanda are going to talk more in detail about this, so I'm not going to say much more, but this is my take home. We must move from a linear economy to a circular economy, and I would define a circular economy ideally as an economy where resources maintain their value for the longest amount of time possible, and products are designed to be reusable, repairable, and regenerative. This means we must recognize that the status quo, grab and go convenience is not sustainable and never will be. And we must consider that material substitution will not bring measurable progress. Instead, we should substitute disposability with reusability. And we have to substitute the incentives that are for single-use alternatives, innovations for incentives for new delivery systems and new materials, which are reusable. And remembering what we learned from the film, The Story of Plastic, if our goal is to break free from petrochemicals and fossil fuel plastics, then consumers need to become advocates for legislation which will support effective waste management and legislation for incentives to incentivize the circular economy and disincentivize products which are disposable and non-regenerative. And most importantly, we need legislation for extended producer responsibility to hold those polluting companies responsible. We do support those orgs and coalitions such as Zero Waste Europe and Plastic Pollution Coalition. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jane. So Attila's talk connects wonderfully to your message about reducing single use. So Attila, please go ahead. And one remark to all participants. So if you have some questions, you can put them in the chat box and we will start answering them after Amanda's talk. So Attila, go ahead.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Jane. Very informative indeed and fully aligned with single use as an absolute disaster. And I don't want to promote a book here that I might have contributed a chapter to, but the chapter that I might have contributed to that book basically starts with before 1950s, the whole world was durable packaging. There was no such thing as single-use packaging, right? And then we had this crazy big war that advanced polymer technology initially for the war machine, and then after the war there was nothing much to do with it but try to integrate it into industry, peacetime industry. And what that meant was that the packaging industry in particular thrived. Allow me to turn off the WhatsApp desktop because it's going to interrupt you. Because all of a sudden single-use packaging was easier and certainly cheaper to use and implement than durable. So, you know, whereas the milkman had to deliver your glass bottles of milk and then come back and take the empties and clean it, wash it, and refill it, the milk industry, let's say, could instantly replace that with a single-use package. So reducing the need for the milkman, essentially, the person, the human, cut some costs there. The single-use packaging cheaper than the glass bottle, so cut some costs there. So it made pure, really good sense actually economically and from a business point of view. What I think maybe wasn't thoroughly thought through at the time is what are the long-term implications? One, what happens to the waste management system in this regard when we start adding more and more waste to it? And two, what happens to the actual resources that these packages are being made from? We are on a finite planet with finite resources. The sad truth is that we still have plenty of petrochemicals, and now it's free. Well, more than free. They're going to be paying us to take it pretty soon. But how do you compete as a recycled material with virgin that is virtually free, right? Or so inexpensive. So I would say those are the big challenges. And of course, Jane, you also mentioned rightly, if you want to create alternative packaging, it's going to be expensive to begin with until you reach a certain volume. And then at that point, you also need to be careful that you're not exploiting the planet for that resource, that natural resource, right? Remember ethanol from corn? Should we be putting corn in our cars or in our mouths? Big question, right? Do we want algae to be our package, or do we want algae to be food for the fish? So very important things to consider, and never mind that petrol is still dirt cheap, right? So how do you then keep the material in the system? Well, hypothetically, if you could go back to the durable system, and that everybody is willing to participate in that durable system, then you reduce your need for new fresh material, right? Because you make one really good durable package, and maybe it's metal, maybe it's glass, and maybe it's even plastic. Plastic has its benefits. Let's not say it's the big mighty evil, because otherwise we wouldn't have our faces on this laptop or on our phones or sitting in cars, or pretty much 80% of everything we touch these days we wouldn't be touching without plastic. So hypothetically, even if it is a plastic, can we put the milk back in a durable container and have that circulate the system? And the short answer is yes. We've proven the concept with Loop. I'm proving the concept now with Peter Pot here in the Netherlands. There is consumer demand. People do want goods back in durable packaging. Currently, the demand is not being met fast enough because there aren't enough players in the system, but I imagine there will be. And let's also remember that there are countries like France and European Commission and others who are pretty soon going to be banning single-use packaging. So if you are a brand whose stuff is still the story of stuff, think about acting now, because inevitably at a certain point in time you will have no choice. So yeah, packaging's become a giant mess. Recycling is not the solution, even if it worked 100% of the time, and it doesn't in the best of cases. And I think that's Germany. It's working 30% of the time. But then let's do the numbers there as well, because it's you still have to collect it, crush it, break it, whether chemically or mechanically. Huge energy output just to take that material back into the system. Again, it's a nice band-aid solution, recycling. But ideally, you want to keep that material in that packaging for as long as possible, hundreds and hundreds of cycles. So that is my view, and some others as well. And there's good data and science to back it.
Okay, thanks, Attila. And can you explain a little bit about Peter Pot as a practical example?
Yeah, absolutely. So Peter Pot is currently an online retailer in the Netherlands. It's a relatively new startup, started about a year ago. The idea was initially to try to see how we bring durable packaging back into the consumer goods system to eliminate the waste from single use, but also think through how that's delivered. So and maybe even looking at further down the supply chain. So the way it started was a few of us here in the Netherlands got together and started a home delivery service in Rotterdam on the cargo bikes, basically. With those cargo bikes, we're delivering groceries, non-perishable groceries, to consumers in IKEA jars, basically. I mean, to start with, the glass ones. And what we've noticed, and by being on bicycles, obviously, we're also reducing CO2 emissions and other nice externalities. And what we realized in a very short period of time, that there was huge uptake. The consumers really wanted this and they really liked it. So what we've then done is, to be able to serve a larger group, we've become three parts of the supply chain. One, we've become the package. So we're on our way to having our own jar, which is a very interesting side story on how complex that jar will be and what material it would be made from and the whole life cycle assessment, etc. So we will be the Peter Pot jar. We are the Peter Pot co-packer. So currently we're selling white label, our own goods, but we now will create an opportunity for brands to come and be on our platform in our package. So we are now also the co-packer, and then we are the retailer. So for the time being, an exclusive retailer through our own website, but we're already in conversation with other Dutch retailers who want to have our package and our product and other brands' product in our package on their shelves. So interestingly, this all happened in a very short period of time. We thought that maybe it will just be the eco-warrior or the eco-conscious that will participate in this, in the same way that those of us that were willing to take our packages to the shops and fill it and bring it back, which is a very small percentage of the European population, probably, well, maybe not the world actually, but definitely in the EU, US. And we realized that there's actually, the consumers really want this, and it wasn't just the eco warriors, it was others, mass consumers, right? eco-conscious mass consumers. So we very quickly scaled up and became a packaging company, a co-packer, and a retailer that is now partnering with other brands and partnering with other retailers. But basically the way it works is you go online, you order your groceries, PostNL delivers it to your home in green vehicles, because we can't serve the whole country on bicycles. As wonderful as the roads are here, it's just not possible. But PostNL, the national courier, is now delivering, and they're one of the greenest fleets in Europe, by the way. So they're one of the most sustainable couriers in Europe. Will deliver your package to your home in durable sacks that are foldable and storable in your home, with the jars inside of them. So, and then the courier takes back the empties, brings it back to Pita Pot. We clean, refill, restock, and recirculate.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And you're growing fast. Yeah.
Very fast. Partly, I think it's because of, again, people are now aware. Also, Loop had made a lot of noise last year when we launched in Davos, when we launched Loop in Davos. So there's definitely consumer demand. And ironically, also, there's the lockdowns have also increased orders because people aren't able to go to traditional retailers, right? Yeah. So online orders have just really taken up.
Yeah.
So national launch and the lockdown is really and I just really think it's just people are sick and tired of seeing the dolphins and the plastic rings on them. Right? Yeah. So the combination of those three factors, you know, not wanting to poison our planet anymore, and also, you know, being locked down in a certain way gives people pause to think. But the possibility that there is another option is finally on the market, whereas until last year there was nothing. Before Loop there was no such option, and before Pita Pot there was no such option in the Netherlands.
Yeah, that's the how you bring it home and how do you bring it in practice and accessible for everybody. True. Yeah.
And that's a good point. It has to be easy, right? Easy, accessible, but accessible both from a convenience that it's being delivered to you, but also the price has to be on par with the stuff that's in the single-use packaging, right?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think, you know, fortunately we figured out the formula where we are competitive on price with the regular supermarkets, plus the added convenience, plus the sustainability element.
Yeah.
But it's really more meant about the movement. We need more of these types of initiatives, of loops, of Pita Pots in other countries, in other cities, because if it doesn't become a movement, it doesn't reach scale. And if there's no scale, then it didn't matter really.
Yeah. But that brings me to Amanda, because it also comes down to awareness, as you mentioned. I mean, all of us who joined probably are totally aware about the problem, but still masses are not aware about the impact of all this plastic in our environment. So I would like to ask Amanda to speak about her wonderful campaigning and maybe show some examples of what you did. Yeah, because your posters are, I think, known around the world, and they are so, impactful. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nina, and thanks, Jane and Attila. It's really amazing to hear your insights on this, and I totally agree that we don't really want to be swapping single-use plastic for single-use other items. It would be so much better to be either refusing and figuring out that we don't need packaging. In some cases, we're just using it out of habit, or you know, reusing is obviously the gold standard, or, you know, keep it, and, you know, just keeping things in the circular economy is definitely the way forward. I guess just as a tiny bit of background about me, so I set up Less Plastic in 2015, and I was one of those people that wasn't aware of the problem or the extent of the problem, and hadn't really connected it to my life. So I moved to the coast in the southwest of England, in Devon, and quite soon after that noticed how bad the plastic pollution was on our local beaches, especially in winter, with so much plastic getting washed up with the seaweed. And really that was a shock to me, because I hadn't realised really the extent of it. I'd always heard of this Pacific garbage patch that felt like such a distant problem. And it really just hit home to me, and was a moment of reckoning, because I saw in the seaweed things that we were using as a family in our everyday lives. And, you know, I just realized that I wanted to do something about it, to help other people maybe who were like me, that didn't understand the extent of the issue, like to understand what was actually really happening. And then also I was on a journey myself to try and find out what we could do as a family to reduce our plastic use. And as I was finding that out, I wanted to share that, because my background was marketing. I felt like I would use my marketing for good. So the things that Nina referred to, here's just one example here. I think it may be shown up backwards. Hopefully it doesn't. Is it good? Okay, so it's 9 ways. I think that one is 9 ways you can reduce ocean plastic, and they're like tips. The first one is boycott single-use plastic. But I've done a whole series of these they went viral online quite early on, which I was really thankful for. I think Greenpeace International shared them. The very first one I did was 9 tips for living with less plastic, and that got shared internationally a couple of times, especially around like New Year's resolution time of year, or when it's Plastic Free July, and you know, special environmental dates. And it's really the sort of purpose of these tips, or one of them is like reasons for refusing single-use plastic, is to try and get across something that feels like quite a complex issue, with lots of complex solutions as well, but in a way that is easy to engage with, so that you feel that you can make a difference. Because, you know, everyday people can feel overwhelmed by this problem, and I don't know how people felt after watching the story of plastic. Personally, I found it very depressing and you know, overwhelming, and maybe reminding me of some, you know, sometimes you might feel powerless, like it was sort of highlighting issues that maybe I hadn't been as aware of, or that I'd put at the back of my mind, you know, the social justice issues as well to do with plastic pollution. It's not just an environmental issue, it's really, you know, causing very unfair imbalances and health effects to different communities around the world. So that can feel overpowering, we can feel powerless. But the point of these infographics really is to help people with knowing what they can do. And even if it's a small thing, if you do that regularly, you know, so boycotting single-use plastic is quite a big thing. But on my 9 tips for living with less plastic, like one is always carry a reusable water bottle. That's quite a simple behavior change that might feel like quite a small thing. But if you do that in your life for the rest of your life, that adds up to be a significant amount less of single-use plastic. And then you have the ripple effect of the people that know you will notice that and maybe have conversations with you about it. And then there's that positive effect of change. So really the purpose of Less Plastic has been to sort of share tips and education as we've found them out ourselves, and to try and make it in a really accessible, engaging way. My original poster has now been translated into 28 languages, which has all been by amazing people just getting in touch via social media or email to say, we love your poster, we want it in our language, and they've volunteered to do it. And then we've got our graphic designer to amend that so that it's in their languages. And then in terms of sort of with the demand for plastic, I know in the film it really highlighted how the, you know, big plastic is looking for new places to sell it, because we are now a lot more aware in the West or the global North, you know, about the issues with plastic waste, and there's a lot, like Attila said, there's a lot more demand for solutions that don't involve plastic waste and plastic pollution, because we are sick and tired of seeing, you know, dead animals washing up with plastic waste. But you know, they are looking for new markets because they still have all this very cheap oil-derived plastic that they want to flog us and make money out of, and they've already invested so much into those factories. So that is a real challenge, because, you know, however much we're doing these campaigns and making people really behind the whole reuse and refuse and repair and regenerate, you know, it is a challenge because these people are powerful and they've got the money and in their sort of view, the need to push this plastic on us. So it's going to be tough. One last thing sort of for my intro talk is, sorry, it is a bit of a shameless plug, but hopefully with the best intentions, I did write this book called Plastic Game Changer, which sort of was to follow on, it's for people in business, and it was really as I was evolving and talking to more people and finding out more about you know, what the solutions are, that yes, we can make a massive difference as individuals, but we can actually make a bigger difference in our workplaces if we and become plastic game changers by getting our workplaces to reduce the amount of plastic, either sort of among employees, what they use in canteens or kitchens, but also in your supply chain, if you've got packaging or anything as part of your processes. So I created on the back of the book, you can see 5 steps to be a plastic game changer. There's a lot more information about this on my website, which is lessplastic.org.uk, and social media, in case you want to sort of see more of our designs, is at lessplasticuk.
Thanks a lot, Amanda. Wonderful job. And I guess it all starts with awareness, and and for people to start making changes. So we have a whole lot of questions. Some were sent in by email, so we have about 20 minutes left. Where to start? So somebody from, oh yeah, Olga. Hello, Olga. Olga is our network partner in the Indonesian Waste Hub. Olga asks, hi everyone, addressing the zero waste shops. We also have quite a bunch of them in Russia. The main issue with those stores is the fact that they are so much more expensive than ordinary plastic wrapping retailers, sometimes 4 or 5 times more expensive. This might not be an issue in the Netherlands, but in the majority of other countries it is. How do you see the solution on this issue? Maybe a question for Attila?
Yeah, sure. And Olga, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but most zero waste shops in the Netherlands closed down within 6 months to a year after opening. And it's not because the Netherlands market didn't want to or wasn't aware about the benefits of them. It's because they were terribly inconvenient, right? People are just no longer used to taking their own packages and jars and jams, whatever, to the store to fill them and bring them back. And there was also the issue of limited variety and assortment in the zero waste shops. So that part was probably the reason why they closed. And that's part of the reason why we started up, because we wanted to solve that challenge. One, the convenience of not having to log your own packages to the store. 2, the price was an issue because those were more expensive. But of course, if you're a retailer, you have to be more expensive because you have huge overhead, right? I mean, to maintain a store is expensive. But if you're an online retailer, you know, a warehouse is much cheaper than a shop. So we solved the price issue. We solved the convenience issue. What we're still working on, which you're very right about, is adding fresh and frozen. So we can do all of the non-perishable food and non-food items, but adding fresh and frozen adds a layer of complexity, which is not impossible, and others are already doing it. Of course, they're not doing it in package free, right? So we have Fresh here in the Netherlands that does exactly that, does, you know, legumes and fruits and vegetables and whatnot, but they don't do it in package free. So technically speaking, a combination of a Pita Prat and a Fresh would be that complete solution. And it is affordable and it is convenient. So I would focus on convenience and price, and then you can focus on expanding your offering.
I guess here in the Netherlands, Attila, also when you want to buy like bio food, like from bio shops or bio farming, you also pay a higher price. I guess people also, if they can afford it, have to.
So in the bio shop you do, but if you go to a Jumbo, for example, the bio product is almost the same price as the regular product. Why? Because they can do volume. They can make large orders, right? And that's what will make organic affordable. This is what made organic affordable in the US many, many years ago when Walmart started selling organic milk, right? Before then, you had to go to a bio shop to buy your bio organic things for 3 times the price. As soon as a major retailer stepped into the space and farming could actually then produce more organic, then cost inevitably drops. So it becomes a numbers issue, it becomes a volume. As soon as you can get to a volume, people will buy bio-organic because they can afford it, and people will buy it in a durable package because they can afford it. So it just becomes a question of time when that tipping point is.
Okay, we'll go to some more questions. This is maybe a question for Jane, but we have to keep it a little bit short because we still have many questions to answer. So this comes from Sarah. She asks, how do we get some sort of regulation so greenwashing isn't happening so often? Oh, Jane, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Nina. Okay, well, some countries do have regulations which effectively criminalize greenwashing. They are regulations which are created to protect fair trade in the market and provide some protection to consumers. The EC has the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. All of these global laws, though, have to be stronger on protecting consumers. Probably the strongest one for consumer protection is the Australian law. It's called the Australian Green Marketing and Australian Consumer Law. And the FTC in the States has published the Green Guides, which is also quite strong. It provides examples of how to make fair marketing claims, and it's basically based on the international standard, the ISO 14021, which is the Eco-Label 2, about how to make self-declared declarations of environmental benefit. And it's quite strong. Right now, you can look on their website. They've got many examples of, for instance, regarding packaging. Companies have unfairly made claims of biodegradability. And right now, Earth Institute in California has filed a law case against big multinationals, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Pepsi, Clorox, Mars, Mondelez. And it's basically stating that these companies have been irresponsible about their claims of their product. They've introduced a harmful product and diverted the attention from the harm by putting the blame on consumers. And they've also, in their law case, cited the FTC Green Guides because these companies, these Coca-Colas and other multinationals, have made unfair claims about the recyclability of their products. So they do exist, but now it is kind of a wonder. Like, you wonder why nobody has accused Coca-Cola of making unfair claim about their of greenwashing their plant bottle, right? I don't know why some people don't speak up, but I think it's really time that we start to, as consumers, to complain about these unfair claims. Right now, Earth Institute is doing that job for us about recyclability of plastics, and now we need to look at everything, false claims about climate change, and so forth. Climate change benefits.
Another question which is really interesting, it's from Shannon, and Olga also responds to that question. So it's related to inequality. So we know that for example, those low value small sachets were developed for India to give day workers who would get a daily pay, would allow them to buy toothpaste. And the market in Asia and South Africa is flooded, in Africa and other countries are flooded with these multi-layer sachets, which are all ending up in the environment in those regions. And Shannon asks, in South Africa, it feels like plastic-free discussions are always with middle to upper class people. And the organic, local, plastic-free products are too expensive for most people. Many people in South Africa struggle to feed themselves, and they don't have much interest in environmental issues, which is the case also in Indonesia and in many regions of the world. So I guess this is, maybe also a question to Amanda. You know, your awareness campaigns, are they also, can people in developing countries relate to them? And
yeah, well, I mean, I've had people from lots of different countries of various rates of development get in touch to want to use the posters. I must admit, I don't sort of ask like exactly which sectors of population they're aiming at, but often it is school kids and people that are involved in beach cleans. And, you know, I think one of the tragic things is that they were actually probably doing fine with their traditional methods of either feeding themselves, or maybe they didn't need some of these products that they're being sold. I know that's definitely the case with like nappies and wipes and you know, historically with powdered milk, with Nestle. You know, it's just so tragic that these big corporations are going into these countries and creating a market that actually wasn't needed. And, you know, people were able to feed themselves often by growing like in their gardens or in their communities. And now they're feeling like they're having to buy cheap plastic packaged food rather than what they had before. So, I mean, I know you can't like sort of turn back time completely, but I just feel like we could learn a lot from what we used to do and take the best bits of that with the best bits of what we do now and try and forge a way forward. And a lot of that is through education and awareness, and hopefully making it not cool. You know, I think in some of those places, maybe they think it's cool to be like a Westerner, but you know, it's actually not cool to walk around with all these disposable products and packaging. And if we can make it more like aspiring, but not just for people with money, for everyone to do things more traditionally, that it's more healthy for people and more healthy for planet, that's got to be where we need to put our focus.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Amanda. I'm going through the questions. I think there are too many to answer in 10 more minutes. We only have 10 more minutes. So maybe, anyway, I will copy everybody's questions and send them in email to all the panelists. So we can maybe come back to them later. Maybe we end with some questions who are related to COVID, because COVID is on everybody's mind. Yeah. So there's a question from the Bahamas that they observed a resurgence of single-use plastics and styrofoam in the Bahamas, and there's a growing concern about that will be the new normal, those single-use materials. And then another question related to that is, how do you see the COVID, actually it's the sort of same question, will impact our initiatives to reduce single-use plastic and our campaigns? So I think maybe we can end with answering these questions, your views from each of the panelists. Yeah. Okay, maybe Jane first, and then Attila, and then Amanda.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that, like, for instance, in Bali, we have the governor's ban, and we have this coalition of orgs who are protecting this ban, and we don't want it, you know, it was already challenged once to a judicial review, and we don't want it to be challenged again. Like some of the bans in the UK, for instance, their ban has been postponed. The EU ban directive was challenged, but it's going to go ahead on schedule. So I do think that the organizations have to come together to defend and have to inform the public that reusables are not less, that single-use plastics are not more sterile, for instance, than reusables, and that we know for a fact that the virus, COVID, can live on plastic longer than on, for instance, paper or textile, which is absorbent textile. I'll let the others comment also.
Yeah, maybe Attila, does it influence your packaging in your Peter Pot model, for example?
No, not at all. So our packaging facilities have all the Dutch and European health and safety standards certified publicly by government. So, I mean, when you go to a restaurant or a hotel, do you worry about the towel that you reuse or the cup or the fork that you reuse in the restaurant? No, because you know it's properly cleaned and sanitized. And that's actually the main argument for reuse. You're already doing it in a restaurant and a hotel. Why wouldn't you redo it at home if you could?
And at home, right? Yeah, at home you also reduce.
So actually, there's no higher risk or infection of any of that craziness. If anything, it's probably safer because you know it's properly sanitized. Whereas with single use, if you're infected and you throw that waste into the bin or it ends up on the street, you're actually spreading the virus because now it's in an open system instead of a closed system, as a reuse system would be. So reuse is actually better in every way, even in a public health situation.
Yeah, yeah. And Amanda, did you make any?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that about, you know, that actually single-use plastic is, you know, not as healthy, whether it's COVID or just like other toxins. You know, it's the cheapest form of plastic. It's, if you put like a plastic lid on a hot coffee, it's just crazy when you think about the toxins that are dripping into that coffee. Whereas if you have reusable, even if it's actually reusable plastic, but it's going to be a higher quality plastic. Personally, I prefer you know, glass or stainless steel or ceramic, but you know, it's single-use plastic is sort of the lowest quality. And then it's also, I know obviously COVID is the thing that we're all fearful of and sort of addressing right now, and you know, rightly so, we need to keep people as safe as we can, but we mustn't lose sight of the longer term health implications. You know, this is the urgent thing that's presenting us now, but if we continue on the path we're on of just throwing away mountains of single-use plastic, which the earth cannot cope with, and we don't have the waste infrastructures to deal with it, you know, apart from burning it, and even then it then goes into the atmosphere. You know, it really is crazy, the longer term health implications, the fact that the fish are eating it, we'll be eating the fish, or any other sort of, it soaks into the soils. Even if you're vegan, you're going to be eating plants that have, you know, it's in the water, it's in the soils. Microplastics are everywhere, and we really do need to address this by stopping the flow of plastic, and single-use plastic is definitely a place to do it. So I think it's very political, and you can't necessarily say no PPE because people need to be kept safe, but there is inappropriate use. You know, even walking, I live in the country, and down a country lane I've seen gloves discarded. I don't know why someone would do that, and what situation you'd be in that you are wearing a plastic glove and you're throwing it into the countryside. It's crazy that people have gone so far to think that plastic is protecting them, where it is going to cause problems further down the line. And I think we should be very clear where it's useful in a medical situation, in a hospital, and where it's actually not, and where it's better just to use soap and water and wash your hands.
Thanks. Yeah, I have one maybe last question. It's quite a big question, and I think we can all talk about it. It was sent in the private chat. How do you convince a business like Coca-Cola to totally change their business model to incorporate reusable packs? So I guess, well, the Coca-Cola is named, but I guess it's addressed to all brand owners. So it's a big question, and I don't think we can answer it in 4 minutes, but maybe one of you can share some light on it.
Well, interestingly, Coca-Cola used to be glass only, right?
True. Yeah, true.
So if they switched to plastic, it was probably, you know, that economic reason that I was referring to. At the same time, if you look at the Loop platform that we put together in recent years and launched in Davos, that includes Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Nestle and all of the big brands. So we saw that there is a willingness to try to go back to durable, but you can't turn the shift for 160 overnight. It takes time, right? And so already the willingness to participate in the test, which is now in Paris and New York being tested, is already a good sign, because if the economics can be figured out, and at the end of the day, economics, it's a volume thing, right? The more people that switch, the sooner the transition happens. So up until now, the problem was that there was no opportunity. There was nothing on the market other than the brick and mortar store where you went yourself and filled and all that, and you couldn't get all of the products that you're used to know, right? Basically the big brands for the average consumer. So if we can create a system for the average consumer to access reusable and to access the mass-produced products in the reusable, then you will see the shift. So the good news is that the brands are trying through Loop. They have embarked on that mission, and now time will tell on the adoption of this 21st century milkman model. Time will tell if the consumer will want this, really want it, and not just say they want it. At the same time, there's also the fact that regulatory environment is enabling this to happen, right? Because they're starting to ban the other guy. So this will only be the option in 10 years' time, potentially. But it will take time. I mean, it took us 60 years to get here. We can't undo it in 6 days or even 6 years.
Yeah,
and it's a much bigger planet now in terms of number of people on it than it was 60 years ago.
Yeah, true. And I think it's also a matter of investment, because of obviously these brand owners need to invest huge amounts of money to change their whole supply system. And
do they invest and change because of incentives, or do they invest and change because of the stick, because of the regulatory stick?
Yeah.
And inevitably, it's probably both, right? Because if the market demands it, then it's an incentive to change.
Yeah.
But if government demands it, then it's going to be even more expensive.
Yeah. But so that's where Amanda comes in, and Jane again, about their campaigning and awareness raising. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, could I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Coca-Cola is quite a tough company. Can you hear me?
Well, yeah, maybe start again, Jen, because it was a little bit interrupted.
Coca-Cola is quite a tough company, but I think if you're dealing with Coca-Cola, you should, in every area they're a little different. You might have good luck pressuring them to where you are. Don't give up. We here in Indonesia, we have Danone has a bottled water called Aqua Sehat, and it's a mineral water, and they have stated that it's more profitable for them to sell reusable 19-liter bottles than single-use bottles, but they they've become a B Corp, but they continue to sell not just 1.5 liter and 750 and 600 ml, but 240 ml cups, which are like a disaster. They're littered all over the beach, and they just make people addicted. They're put into all the boxes for events, and Danone is the only multinational selling in this packaging size, and they even created it back in the 80s. And even they've become a B Corp, they don't want to drop it. Even it's more profitable for them to sell in reusable 19-liter gallons, as they're called. They won't drop this. So I would love to know how we convince them. I think it's important to keep complaining and complaining about it. They aren't recyclable either. There's no excuse for them to be on the market.
No, I guess the brand audits play a big role, and the brand audits.
Yes, they've already got the evidence that they are the most littered item in Bali.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's 2:01, so I think we have to close up here. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all questions, so we probably will follow up with another webinar at a later date. So thanks very much for all participants, and especially for Jane, Attila, Amanda for giving your time for this webinar.
And
So
thank you,
see
Nina.
next time. Yeah. Bye.
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 Nina.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks
Bye.
very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.